Hey everyone, it's Mike with Confused IT. I just want to make a video here going over how to set up vCenter HA. There's a couple prerequisites to set it up. One of them is you have to have 3 hosts in a cluster for the setup process to go through. Basically, you need 1 host per node, and there's 3 nodes. You have your active vCenter, your passive vCenter, which is like your failover, and then your witness, which I guess watches the health of the active and the passive. The other thing you need to have a dedicated vCenter HA network. Which is something I'm not going to cover on how to create in this video, but it's pretty straightforward. You just need to create a separate network that is just dedicated to the vCenter HA traffic. So in my case, I set up a distributor network and I just threw a VLAN tag on it, or a VLAN ID rather on it, which isolates the traffic just to that one network. So that's pretty much it. So I'm going to go ahead and set it up. So basically, you just log into your vCenter, go over to the Configure tab, go to the vCenter HA section, and then hit Set Up vCenter HA. So we're going to set the HA network for the active node. This is that network I was just mentioning that's dedicated to HA traffic. Okay, and then I'm going to go into the first one doesn't get really touched. The second one is your passive. So we're going to hit edit. I'm going to fix the name here. Passive. I'm going to put it just in this folder. It doesn't really matter where you put it for the most part. So I'm just going to put it in this folder that I have for infrastructure. I'm going to go ahead and put it in the cluster. I'm going to put it on a separate storage. So for me, this is my active vCenter is on this SSD Synology, and my so the passive and the witness I'm going to put on this separate Synology that is separate from the active. Probably best practice to have each node on their own separate storage, but in my lab I don't have enough storage to do that. So I'm just going to put the active on the primary storage and then the witness and the passive on this NAS, just so that figure if the main storage goes down, my active vCenter is down, then at least the passive and the witness have they have their own storage that's separate. And if this storage happens to go out, at least the active vCenter is on different storage and it should stay up. So put that there. Here I'm going to just select the management network for vCenter. This is the main network that you use to communicate with your vCenter. And then the HA network. And hit next. So that's pretty much it for this one. Just make sure everything's correct. Name looks good. Folder's fine. It's in the cluster. It's on the NAS data store. It has that management network that I created. This is generally just whatever network all your hosts in your vCenter are on. And then your HA network. Okay, do the same thing for the witness. Which again, I'm going to fix the name. Put it in that same folder. Cluster. The other NAS. This one only gets the HA network. It doesn't actually have any management IP address associated with it, just the HA. And finish. Looks good. All right, so we're going to hit next. And here we're just going to get everything on IP address. So this is throughout the whole thing, it's just the IPs that are going to exist on that HA network. So for me, my HA network has a 192.168.15 subnet. So let's give it 2 subnet mask, and the gateway is optional, but I'm going to put it in anyway. Okay, so this looks good. Obviously, there's nothing else on that subnet, so for me, 2, 3, 4 are available addresses for these 3 nodes. Subnet's accurate. The gateway is the .1 for me. There's this section here for editing management network settings. This you don't have to touch really at all. This is just, I don't even know the use case for this would be, but essentially you could have the passive node have different network settings than your active node, but that if you're going to fail over, I would imagine you'd want your your new active node to have the same config as your failed node or your other node. So I leave that default settings. Basically, when it fails over from active to passive, the passive have the exact same IP scheme and DNS servers and everything as the previous primary, or the primary that is now down, or in a failover state. So I'm going to hit finish. And that's pretty much it. So a couple things that you're going to see happening here is, obviously it's setting up vCenter HA. Down here in the bottom, it's going to clone the active vCenter into a passive node by creating a snapshot of the primary. The other things that are going to happen is it's going to create a witness VM. So there's the passive just got created. A witness node will get created shortly. It's also going to create a, what do you call these? A VM host rules, or VM host rule, which is, it's not there currently, but there'll be a weird named one in here just for the vCenter that's going to basically contain a rule that specifies that the active, passive, and witness need to be on separate servers, which is the reason why you need 3 hosts, because there's 1 VM to 1 host ratio. So if you are not using vCenter HA in production, theoretically you could edit that rule that gets created, and you can take out the witness so that only the vCenter and active and the vCenter passive have to be on separate hosts, which will allow you to kind of power off one of your 3 hosts, or only require 2 of them to operate. Obviously, in a failure situation, it may not be the greatest thing, but that's kind of how I run it in my lab when I don't need 3 servers and I'm not running anything in production. So that's basically the 3 things that it creates, or the couple things it creates. I forget if I mentioned anything else in there, but that's pretty much it. It does take a little while. Obviously, cloning the active vCenter, which has like 1 million disks, not a crazy amount of space, but just 1 million disks, and I guess a lot of data has to get transferred around. So it can take some time. I'm going to pause this and I'll follow up when it's done. But usually you could take a good, half-hour break here and then come back, and it will hopefully be almost done. So, all right, so we're back now, and looks like everything worked perfectly. So shows that everything is healthy. Again, this is in that vCenter section under configure, vCenter HA. This is where you can see your nodes, if they're configured, what their settings are, and if the HA is healthy or not. So yeah, looks all good. We have 3 VMs here. Obviously the active vCenter, which is your primary, the passive, and the witness. From here we can initiate a failover, which is helpful if you want to reboot your active vCenter, but you don't want to go down temporarily or something like that. So you can initiate failover here. You can put it in maintenance mode. You can disable it. And then, as I was saying before, one of the things that it creates under the cluster is this VM host rule. So you could, if you're not in production, I suppose you could just delete it. But ideally, to keep it still relatively effective, in my case, I'll just go in here and I'll remove the witness from this rule. And that will allow me to put a host in standby mode and continue to function. So I can still have the passive node and the active node on 2 separate hosts, but the witness can exist on one of the same hosts as the active and the passive. Obviously, if I was in production, I wouldn't recommend that at all. But if you're tight on resources and you still want HA, this is one way to get it, with sacrificing some redundancy there, but still possible. You still need it you still have to have 3 hosts to set up HA, because if it can't create this host rule and it can't distribute the VMs evenly, I found that the setup process fails. So you do have to have 3 hosts. They have to be on, they have to be working, they have to be in a cluster. But once it's configured and set up, you can mess with this rule, and it'll continue to work, at least in a general capacity. So that's pretty much everything. I'm trying to think of anything I missed here. If for some reason you have an issue with your nodes, for example, somebody accidentally deletes one of these, obviously the active one would be really bad. I don't know if that's recoverable, but if it's a passive node or witness node, in this section of the UI, there will be a redeploy button, usually over here somewhere, where you can click that and it will recreate those VMs. I know that exists for the witness and the passive. If you lose your active, I don't know what happens there. I don't know if obviously the passive becomes the active, but it'll still be called the passive node. So I don't know if you can restore from that like you can with the other 2 nodes if they go missing. So yeah, that's how you configure vCenter HA. Hope this was helpful to some of you out there, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye. Thank you for watching this video. Please like and subscribe. Our website has some resources that you might find useful as well. Confused IT is a non-for-profit organization ran by IT professionals. Our mission is to make IT knowledge more accessible and easier to digest. Thanks for watching.